How is it already in progress? I just pressed the button. Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny and
Kenny Squared.
with the Sports on the Positive Tip podcast. Kenny, how's it going there in Cleveland this morning? I know the Browns had a week off. They, hopefully got themselves together a little bit. What's the word there in Cleveland with the Browns?
It's kind of been a quiet week. If I remember right, they have the Ravens coming up.
Yep.
Which obviously the Ravens had a little bit of controversy in how they ended their game, but I don't know. I don't want to sound too intense or dramatic, but the season could kind of be on the line here.
Yeah.
It seems like this. It's funny because, like, you look at the AFC North, all of the teams have either a 500 record or better. And all of them, it looks like when one just getting the edge, they do something dumb and fall apart. Like the Steelers, it was like, oh, wait, are the Steelers actually good? And then they tie to the Lions. The Ravens, like, they have that chance. They went like the final blow, and the Steelers, in order to like kind of secure the division, Ravens can't do it. The Browns have been so up and down all year.
Yeah.
The Bengals too, like they were flying high a couple weeks ago, and then all of a sudden they kind of fallen down to the pack. So
Yeah.
I think the Browns kind of need to keep pace with the rest of these teams in the division. You don't want to fall too far behind.
Yeah, it's funny because it's week to week. You can't. I mean, I would say the Cardinals are probably the best team right now. The Packers, but it's hard to the AFC. I don't know. Maybe the Chiefs because they've gotten back on a roll. So it's really hard. I would say probably New England. In the AFC, which is hard. Like I said, I said this last week. I'm not that surprised the Pats are this good. I'm surprised Mac Jones is been this good, but they had lost a lot of guys last year. Let me go back to the Ravens. So what I watched that game, or at least most of the second half. I was stunned that he went for two there on the last play. Usually you'll see that with a team that's out of it. That'll be like, you know what, we're not going into overtime. We're just going to win it here or lose it here. It doesn't matter. It's kind of rare that you see a team that is in big time contention like they are to kind of just all or nothing and not take the game into overtime. What were your thoughts on that?
I was surprised by it too. The Ravens have done like kind of like head scratching things like that before. Like earlier this year against the Chiefs, they went for like a why would you go for it 4th and 1? I think it was in their own territory late in the fourth quarter against them.
Yeah.
But I don't know. To me, you have arguably the greatest kicker of all time. Guy set the record for the longest kick in NFL history this year. Just take the extra point.
Yeah.
Maybe what they were thinking is like, because the Steelers kicker, I heard this on a video a couple days ago. He hasn't missed from 50 yards out or longer at all this year.
Mm-hmm.
So like I guess I can kind of understand like you don't want to, but then again, like I was gonna say, you don't want to like lose the ball and then in overtime and then just kind of lose the game that way. But you'll still get the ball back. So I don't know what they were doing.
Yeah, and it's not like the Steelers were lighting up the scoreboard. I mean, that was a low scoring game. Now if they had gotten the 2-pointer, everybody would be applauding. Harbaugh. Harbaugh is a great coach. I think. His brother gets a lot of publicity, and we don't talk too much college football. We probably should today because we got the Final Four there. But I think John Harbaugh has just been done a great job with that team over the years. There was a little bit of a head scratcher to me, though, whether he made it or not. I'm just like, taking it to overtime. It's not like the game was anybody's. It's not like it was a shootout, 35-31 or something like that. It was a defensive battle for the most part. But I agree. The Browns definitely need to win to keep up. What do you think about the Patriots? I didn't clearly get your thoughts on them last week.
I don't know. I do have a fun fact associated. I'll just say it now. So they only attempted 3 passes on Monday night, which I'll get to that in a second. But that hasn't been done since the 70s.
Wow.
And an NFL team has attempted 3 or fewer passes in a game only 7 times in the 40s. We know, like, they hand the ball off a lot. Just once in each of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So, like, in the last, 70 years, what Bill Belichick put together was only done 3 times.
That's amazing.
And I don't know. I think the Patriots are looking more and more like they could actually be that legit team. Like you had said, they were decimated last year by all the COVID stuff.
Yeah.
So they got all of those guys back on defense. They spent a lot on offense. I believe they spent more than they ever have in free agency.
Yeah.
So they completely rebuilt the team in like a year, which is really impressive. But also, I think it's a huge testament to how good Coach Belichick actually is. Because imagine if they make the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
2 years after losing Tom Brady, like that's wild.
And there's nobody that would bet against them at this moment for sure. You know.
Oh yeah.
I can't add anything to what you said. I'll ask you this. So there's really 2 big matchups this week. The big 4:00 game. Well, before I get to that, both the Jets and Giants, after we had a little hope last week, they both lose this week. I don't know if you want to say anything about the Giants.
Well, I'll say this. I'm going to compare this to another one of our beloved teams, the New York Knicks. It seems like the last few years, both the Giants and the Jets, we've been looking forward to draft day. Because we're like, okay, so who's this guy that I've barely heard of that I'm going to be rooting hard to be doing great? I want to get to the point where, like, remember this past draft, like, I don't even think I watched it. I didn't care at all.
Yeah.
And I forgot who was it that they drafted in the first round? Was it Quentin Grimes?
Yeah.
I don't remember. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, and he's been okay, but like also when you're a good team too, you don't really care about who the draft pick is because they're probably not going to play a lot.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like every year it's both the Jets and the Giants, and it seems like I don't know if there's going to be an end to it. Like, do you bring back Daniel Jones? Do you bring back Joe Judge? I think the answer is probably for them both yes.
Right.
And like, I don't know if Daniel Jones is going to be an elite quarterback. He's definitely not the best quarterback in the division. That would have to go to Dak Prescott. I don't know if he's better than Jalen Hurts, and I don't know what you want to call Washington. I mean, they don't even have a team name, but Taylor Heineke, like, so you're kind of stuck there. And then you also have, like, Joe Judge kind of seems like a lot of times that he doesn't fully know what he's talking about. And I mean,
wow.
Like you, I don't like the whole changing of coaches every few years. Like,
no, I hate that. Yeah.
I would give him at least a couple more years, especially like you rip this team down to the studs. You got 2 top 10 draft picks. Kind of start from there.
Yeah.
At least with the Jets, like you have a guy that you drafted number 2 overall. You're not going to give up on him very quickly. Your coach is in his first year, so you got to give him at least another year. It's rare that you fire a guy after 1 year unless it's like Freddie Kitchens.
Yeah.
But well, that's a whole different story. So I don't know.
Yeah, we went down that road. It's going to be an interesting off season, and the NFL was still way away from that. But there's a bunch of teams that have some decisions to make. You know, on is this the quarterback of the future or not? The Giants are definitely one of them. You know, the Jets had to do that last year. So with Sam Darnold, and although the season started off well for him, and again, it's inconclusive now because he got hurt, but his last 3 or 4 games, he wasn't playing well at all. He was playing like he was with the Jets. So it's hard, man. It really is. I don't know what to make of the Giants, to be honest. I like what they've done on defense, for sure. But they need to get and they have playmakers. So I'm not sure what to make of them. The Jets, they hung in there. I thought, the Eagles are a decent team, but that's a team that the Jets could beat. And but again, I know that their quarterback, they're going to give him a chance, So it's inconclusive to me. Seen some flashes, but I do like their coach. I think that this is the guy that should be here for a while. I love his energy. I love his spirit. And he seems to have gotten much better with the play calling and a few other things that head coaches, I think, struggle with, how to handle timeouts and stuff like that. So I think he's good. I think he's going to be a good coach. I really do. I think if he surrounds himself with good coordinators and everything, I think he'll be good. So I'm optimistic with the Jets, cautiously optimistic. But again, this whole looking forward to draft day. So speaking of, it's so our eyes don't deceive us here, because remember, I've been saying this for several years now, that like when Alabama was playing LSU or Clemson and those teams were playing, it looked like an NFL game. Every single star, like young star in the NFL, is it me, or they all come from like Alabama or LSU or Clemson or Georgia? It's like every single one. Like the Steelers have the really good rookie. Maybe he's not a rookie, might be a second year running back, Najee Harris, and I'm like, Najee Harris, it's familiar. Should have oh, that's right, he was with Alabama. Derrick Henry. You could go. The list could go on and on. It's amazing how many players they've now put into the NFL. If you just look at LSU, Alabama. I know LSU's been down the last couple of years, but LSU, Alabama, Clemson. Just those teams alone, they've just loaded the NFL up with star players. All right, closing out the NFL real quick. Let me get your take on. I see two big matchups. There's probably a few others, but two big matchups this Sunday and Monday night. The Buffalo at Tampa Bay, big 4:00 game on Sunday, 4:25, and then the Rams at Arizona, big Monday night game. And they lucked out. The Eagles don't have those huge matchups Monday night, but these last two are some pretty good ones. So Buffalo, Tampa Bay, what's your take? Buffalo, I don't know what to make of them so much, but what do you think with them in Tampa Bay?
I think this is a bigger game more for Buffalo than it is for Tampa, mainly because the Patriots made a huge statement against them last week.
I agree.
They have to show that they are still an elite team. And also, obviously, the idea of trying to keep pace. You don't want to fall 2 games back from New England in December. That's essentially saying that they're going to win the division. Because like with Tampa, I'm looking at the standings here. They've got a 4-game lead. So for them, it's more about staying fresh, kind of staying in tune. And hey, people are going to say, oh, is this the potential Super Bowl matchup?
Yeah.
But in reality, I think this is a huge game for Buffalo. I don't think it's as crucial as the Browns saying their season's on the line, because I think the Bills could still easily win a wild card.
Yeah.
But if they want that division, which going into the season, probably about 80% of people pick the Bills to win the division. If they want to show that they are actually a good team, this is a team to stop. The Bills do have a good defense, so I think it's going to be a very tight game.
Yeah.
Is that one in Tampa?
That's in Tampa.
Remember?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So you're not going to have to worry about snow.
No. No. How about, speaking of warm weather, they're playing indoors, right? Rams at Arizona. What are your thoughts there? Big Monday night game.
Yeah, it has been fun, because usually you get the Giants have been on Monday Night Football twice this year. I think once again, kind of in the same boat as the Bills, I think the Rams, it's a huge statement game, because not only are you facing your divisional opponent, which once again, they're 2 games back, you lose this one, you're 3 back, plus I believe Arizona won earlier against them this year. So you're essentially giving them the division. But also, once again, a lot of people pick the Rams to not only win the division, but also to win the Super Bowl. Now,
Yeah.
I don't think that they would be out. It looks like they'll probably end up as like the 5 seed, which means they'll play whichever really bad, whoever ends up with the worst division record. Right now, it might be the Cowboys, but I think with them, especially like with all of the star power that they have, adding Odell, adding Von Miller, you already have Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey on the defensive end. Matt Stafford was supposed to be the piece that takes them to the promised land. So far, that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
And I think the Cardinals can really show, like, we are the best team in the NFL with a win. If it's a close game, people might be like, well, you kind of lucked out there. But and honestly, for me, I think Arizona is, you had mentioned it too, I think right now they are the best team in the league. It does change from week to week. So next week we could probably be saying New England, or maybe we'll be like, oh, wait, look at Tampa Bay. But I think right now it is Arizona. They have the most wins in football.
Yep.
They're 10-2.
Yeah. Yeah, they're really good. I agree with everything you said. I'll just say this, man. It is a huge game for the Rams. This is where they need to step up and they need to show that they're, that this great coach, they've got a really, really good coach, can bring all these pieces together and put together a great game start to finish. Because they haven't done that since, a few games that they played in the first half. And Stafford, it's a big statement game for him. It's national television, nobody else playing, Monday night, here we go. They've got to really, really step up if they are going to actually be a Super Bowl contender and win this game against Arizona to give them at least a shot at a higher seed. I don't think they're going to catch Arizona, with Arizona being 10-2 right now. But they've got to show that they can beat Arizona because they might meet them again, in the playoffs. I think it's a huge game for the Rams. Hey, let's hit the Final Four real quick in college football. The seasons just go on, and you just Nick Saban. You compare him to Bill Belichick. I think this guy is just an unbelievable coach. But Alabama just, Georgia was number one almost all year long. Alabama goes in there and beats them relatively handily as well. And so it's nice to see Cincinnati, in the Final Four, kind of a little bit of a wild card team almost. In there, any thoughts on the Final Four? I know you're kind of like me on the fringes with college football. It's hard to watch football on Saturday and Sunday. I don't know how people do it, but it's hard to watch both days as much as I would love to, but just don't have the time to do it. But any initial thoughts on the Final Four?
Well, being in Ohio State is always a big thing. Seeing people cross out M's everywhere. But man, Michigan handled them pretty handily, and they hadn't beaten Ohio State in like 10 years.
Yeah.
So, so it's a big win for Harbaugh, obviously, because then also like the whole rivalry thing there is huge. But I don't know. To me, it just seems boring to say Alabama, but like, I feel like I can't root against them. I feel like they always at least make the championship game, if not always win it.
Yeah. It's hard to pick against them. They're just, it seemed like for a couple of years Clemson had their number. Obviously, Clemson kind of retooling after losing, a lot of great players, and they've had a good 5, 6, 7 year run. Clemson, with Watson and then Trevor Lawrence. But I think that it's hard to pick against Alabama. I couldn't tell you a lot of the specific players, except their quarterbacks for all 4 teams. But it's going to be interesting. I'll be watching. They do that right too. They put it right on New Year's Eve. Nothing else is on. They put one game at 4 o'clock, the next one at 8. I think it's great the way they set that up. It really is. All right. Let's talk a little NBA real quick. The Knicks, big win for them last night. I'm watching that game last night, and I'm like, I don't know if you were like me. I'm like, I hardly know anybody on San Antonio anymore. That used to be a star-studded team. I mean, they play hard, because it's Popovich, but I I was like, man, who are these guys? Like, I didn't see Rudy Gay even. I remember he was on there the last couple of years. I honestly didn't know probably more than one player on San Antonio, but they played hard. But the Knicks, that's a good win on the road, though.
Yeah, and it seems like I think one of the bigger takeaways for me, RJ Barrett's been horrible the last couple weeks.
Yeah,
I think kind of hopefully getting him back on track will be a good thing.
definitely.
Because I don't know, this offense has been kind of weird this year anyway. Obviously the whole Kemba Walker thing really hasn't worked out. I love how he's taken it though.
Yeah,
He's like, yeah, I could complain, but I'm going to be a good teammate. And I mean, you never know, an injury can come up, or you
long
can
year.
kind of just like,
It's a long
yeah,
year.
like
Yeah,
he could get back in there. But
yeah,
but I think like it seems like RJ Barrett needs to kind of get his stuff together in order for the Knicks to continue to thrive. Obviously, they had a brutal stretch here, playing the Bulls, playing the Nets, playing the Bucks, playing the Nuggets. Like it's just a lot of really good teams.
yeah,
But I think it seems like they've come out where they're not in a horrible position,
yeah,
which I think is a good thing. Obviously, would have loved to win more games in there, but
yeah.
I think they're still in pretty prime position here.
They are. They are. I mean, I think they'll be okay. I think they'll right the ship. I mean, I'll say this, and then I have another question for you. It's just weird scheduling with the NBA. Used to be, you go to Houston, San Antonio, and Dallas. You do the Texas thing all in, a week or something like that. They play in Indiana tonight, which is really an odd back-to-back. So that's going to be tough for them. Although Indiana's not playing that well, but Indiana always gives the Knicks fits. Want to hear your take on these rumors now of John Wall. And I think we might have hit on John Wall a little bit last week. But Damian Lillard, there are some teams, the 76ers, I think they said the 76ers, the Knicks, maybe the Celtics was the third team. There's three teams that are just kind of waiting for him to demand a trade because they feel like then, Portland will be, their hands will be tied a little bit. Once he demands a trade before they make it up, and probably the price tag will go down a little bit. How do you see that whole thing playing out? And do you think the Knicks will be a big player for him?
Yeah, well, with the John Wall thing, to me, that's not really much. Like I can understand the rumors are probably there and they're probably pretty substantial. I think John Wall's gotten to the point where, because I mean, Rockets are awful. And I think he's like, I don't really want to play for this team. I never was really intending to.
Yeah.
But then, but now I think he wants to play. But to me, if the Knicks are getting John Wall is just pretty much a number one overall pick version of Kemba Walker. Honestly, they even kind of look the same. So I don't think that's that much of an upgrade. Obviously, Lillard would be a huge upgrade. I think that would be like the point guard the Knicks haven't had in like decades.
Yeah.
As far as what you'd have to give up, I don't know. But I do think Lillard might get to that point where he's finally like, okay, I think I'm out. Because that they fired their GM recently because of all of like the scandals and whatnot.
Yeah.
Apparently, a lot of the people that could take that position, Lillard's not a fan of, or wants to get rid of Lillard and start over. So that I don't understand either. Like Damian Lillard's one of like the top 5 point guards in the NBA. Like
I'd be trying to
build
get
around him.
Yeah, I'd be trying to get him, other players to play with him. And CJ McCollum is out for a while now too, which is going to really hurt him because he's such a good player as well. Very underrated, I think, because he plays in Lillard's shadow kind of there. That's an interesting, really interesting team. Portland has been so consistent for years now. And I can't remember the last time Portland had a bad team, but they typically will make the playoffs and get bumped in the first round. A few years ago, I remember they went to the conference finals. But for the most part, they usually get bumped like in the first or second round. But they're never really a bad team. They're always kind of that middle of the road team. But Lillard is a generational talent, and he's right still in his prime. I mean, how many game-winning shots does he have? Doesn't he have like 8 or 10, like, last second game, and including a couple in the playoffs, which you and I heard years ago
We
coming
love
out
that
of
one.
Yankee Stadium. And so I don't know. I think John Wall, he's just a scorer. And I don't want to downplay that because he probably could like suit up tomorrow and score 20 every night. But I'm not sure if that's what the Knicks need right now. Lillard, listen, you'd probably have to make almost a Carmelo Anthony type trade to get him, I think. No matter even if he's a man to trade or not. He can demand a trade all day long. What's he going to do? You know what I mean? He can't, when he sit out, he doesn't seem like that type of guy. But would he be a brooding superstar like Anthony Davis did in New Orleans? He doesn't seem like that type of guy. I think he'd still play hard every night. So I think whether it's the 76ers or the Knicks, you got to have to give up a lot to get him. And, on the Knicks at that point, they had a couple of good years with Carmelo, right? But had they just waited a few more months, like Donnie Walsh wanted them to, they would have had all those guys they traded away plus Carmelo. But Lillard is not like that. You can't wait for him to go to free agency. He's nowhere near that. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. I think this is going to come to a head. I really do. I think at some point Portland's got to do something because they're essentially going nowhere unless they landed somebody big to play alongside him, which doesn't seem likely.
Yeah.
Hey, let's jump to baseball. Let's spend some time there. And so the collective bargaining agreement, and so essentially, even though it doesn't seem like it, baseball's on strike. Everything kind of stopped.
Yeah.
And by the way, Buck Showalter is interviewing with the Mets today, so fingers crossed on that. Yeah. I don't know what to make of it. They didn't learn the lessons of the past. I'll say this real quick. The big stain on Bud Selig's career, right? Bud Selig was commissioner for the longest ever in baseball, longest time ever. And I thought he did some great things. Interleague play, I know a lot of people don't like it, especially folks my age, but I like it. The wild card he did, some of the expanded playoff stuff. I thought he did a really good job, right? All-Star game stuff, you take and leave that, but the big stain on his career was the strike in 1994 and how that season was going so well. And to shut it down, I believe it was in August that it shut down. And I remember it was like, they'll be out for a day or two, and and the World Series gets canceled. It was surreal, what happened that year. And the fans left, right? And so that led to something. That led to Sammy Sosa, Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, and now the whole big home run thing. And Selig really turning a blind eye to what everybody could see, that it was steroids, right? That it invaded the game, and it really changed the game kind of forever at that time, right? Because, you still have so many players that are, all or nothing, home run or strikeout, right? And while there's probably not a lot of players on steroids these days, it just changed the game. It brought the fans back because the fans got into it in 98, right? In 99 and beyond, and then the whole thing blows up in Congress, but it all stemmed from that strike in 94. So I'm just wondering if Rob Manfred, who worked obviously under Selig for years, he should get this, and he should know that I need to get Tony Clark in a room, and we need to just hammer this thing out. So you know more about this than I do. I jotted just a couple of things down. I think the big thing is for me is the free agency time, right? Where, and I think Chris Bryant was, which is why I don't think Chris Bryant, there's rumors that he would go back to the Cubs. He was so bitter when the Cubs kept him in the minor league just for that extra month, his first year, so that they can keep him for that extra year. What is it, like 6 years? You have to have 6 full years of service. So they want to bring that down, I think, to 5 or something like that. They don't want, the teams to, to put a guy in the minor leagues just so they can hold on to him for, an extra year. Maybe put him down for a month. It's just silly. I think the DH also is probably a big deal, which I don't understand why that's a sticking point. Totally giving up that fight. I've never liked the DH, but the National League's the only league in the whole world. Little league on up, the whole world that doesn't have a DH. So come on, let's get that done. But what's some of the things that you would fix when it comes to this whole collective bargaining agreement, and how would you fix this strike?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things I think is the service time issue, because Chris Bryant, which when you think about it, Chris Bryant would have been a free agent last offseason as opposed to this offseason.
Right.
No one's talked about Chris Bryant at all.
Right.
But he would have been the guy last year.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, and he's obviously not the only one that they've done that to. The Seattle Mariners former president CEO was very open about, we're manipulating service time on pretty much all of our players.
Yeah.
Yankees did it with Gleyber Torres a few years ago. Mike Trout was held back for a month. I believe also Bryce Harper too.
Yep.
These are guys that are really, really good. So I do think that that's a big issue. I'm not really sure if there's a way to fix it, because I feel like the owners will always find a loophole. And I think that's kind of one of the bigger issues. But I think one of the bigger things that baseball can do is definitely shorten the service time, because they have the 3 years of control, owner contracts, and then the 3 years of arbitration. I would cut each of those to 2, so you have 2 years of team control, 2 years of arbitration, and then add in kind of the NBA restricted free agency. So players can get offer sheets from whatever team they want.
I like that.
And the original team has an opportunity to match it. I would also add that those contracts can't be more than 3 years, so that let's say they try to let's say this big star goes and gets an offer sheet for 7 years, 150 million, but they don't want to play with their current team. That at least gives them an out there. Players obviously can only be a restricted free agent once, and teams can also buy out those years, kind of like they do with arbitration,
right?
Where you have a guy after this 30-year team control, sign him to a 4-year deal, and after that he becomes an unrestricted free agent.
Right.
I think kind of adding that layer in will, first of all, increase, because if you have teams bidding for, even if it's a decent player, for example, Jordan Montgomery, he's not a stud by any means, but left-handed pitcher that can give you 150 innings, people will bid on him. That will give you more money than what you would get in arbitration. So I think kind of adding that layer could do that. And also it gives the players a little bit more flexibility. If you really want to leave your team, you have that opportunity to do so a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the bigger things. I think also one of the issues is competitive balance. It's kind of been a little bit of a sticking point. I think baseball for that, you don't really see tanking too much, but also you've seen teams that have been bad for years. When was the last time the Pittsburgh Pirates had a decent team?
Yeah.
Baltimore Orioles have been bad for about 5 years. But also teams kind of go through cycles. But also you look at a team like the Mariners. The Mariners haven't made the playoffs in 20 years.
Yeah.
So it's hard to kind of have a good medium. I think doing a draft lottery might help. It'll prevent teams from tanking. Also, I would consider expanding the playoffs, but not crazy. I would say add in another wild card on both sides, and then you could do kind of the way the NFL used to have their bracket. The division winners, the top 2 division winners are in the division series. The third one can pick their wild card team, because they, for whatever reason, baseball wants to do that, and then kind of go from there. Do a 3-game series, the whole 9. I would also add in the possibility of maybe adding in 2 extra teams, 1 in each league. So you got 16. You can actually have like the full NFL format where you have 4 divisions as opposed to 3.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if they would go for that. They have talked about making it a 14 playoff bracket, which to me that's a little excessive, but
a lot. Yeah.
But either way, I think they've got to do something in that regard. But maybe also like one of the ways the NFL does competitiveness pretty fairly is like doing like a weighted schedule. Like the better teams have the tougher schedules the next year. Maybe you do that where like you get more, and it might also add some intrigue. So like you get more teams, like you're getting more Rays and Astros or Yankees White Sox games as opposed to getting like Yankees Rangers the same time that you get Yankees Mariners or whatever. Like that might add a little bit, but also I don't know if they would do that. But bottom line is Manfred said that the best way to save the season was a lockout. He's got to prove it. Because there's been a few lockouts that are like, oh yeah, we're not going to lose any games. We're not going to lose any games. Like, remember the NBA was like that, and they lost probably about like 16, 17 games off of their season.
Yeah.
The NHL was the same way, and they lost their entire season.
So,
like you said, I think they got to get guys on the phone now. They've got to start really moving this along because really, like, I think what they're thinking is like, oh yeah, we can kind of ice them out until like February. But like, if you're working on negotiations in February, it's going to take at least a month or 2 for you to kind of figure out something that's going to work for everyone. So then you're looking at the spring training being delayed. Players are going to hate only a shortened spring training because they're going to say everyone's going to get hurt. So it's going to start eating into regular season games.
Yeah.
So you really got to get going on it. I really don't like the idea of doing like a universal age for free agency. That's something that they kicked around, but like remember Bryce Harper was called up at 19. Some of these guys are young.
Right.
Like imagine being with your team for 10 years just because you're not old enough.
Yeah. Doesn't make any sense.
I think the service time thing just needs to be tweaked, and there needs to be like maybe you just eliminate the. Like, it doesn't have to be a full year. If you're up at all, if you play in a game, that starts your service clock.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Then teams will get desperate, right? Because, they'll be like, hey, we need this guy, we just want to send him down for a month, but we need him to come up. You need to send all that stuff in to Rob. Man, that was great stuff, man. I don't really have anything to add to it. I love the unrestricted free agency thing, and you can even do kind of the Larry Bird rights that the NBA does. That the team holds on to it, right? So if they re-sign with their team, they get to make more. As opposed to if LeBron stays with the Lakers, they retain his rights. He'd make more than if he went back to Cleveland. That's an example. That's awesome. But I'll wrap this up by saying this, Ken. If there's games missed, like if the season doesn't start on time, and if there's games missed, baseball's at too fragile a state right now. The fans definitely are coming back, and obviously you see the amount of money the owners are spending, so they're making money somewhere, right, through TV and attendance was up this past year. But I think that was a lot of people just missed baseball because of COVID. But going to a game in any city, I'm a little jaded, and so are you, right? Because we did it for years in New York. It was a big effort. It was money, right? The money was a big deal at times, but it was more, you got to get down there, fight traffic, or take the train, and you're like a sardine in a train. It's a long game, so if you got to work early the next morning, I'm talking about a weekday game. It's hard to do. You have to rethink that, and I tell you, the young fan, there's too many other things for them to do. The young fan that's maybe in their teens and just got into baseball, but it's into basketball and the football. there's a lot of things for them to do on a summer night. You know what I mean? For years, our summers are filled with, okay, when nothing else is on tonight, there's a baseball game on, right? Um, they'll be heading down a road to disaster that I don't think they'll be able to cut because there's not going to be another steroid era coming. They're going to head down a road that, that'll be hard for them to recover from. So they need to fix this. All right. Are you ready for fun facts?
I'm ready. Here we go.
All right. As always, I want you to do yours last because you always have really good ones. My fun facts really aren't crazy fun, but I think you'll find them interesting. They're around this class of folks that they put into the Hall of Fame. And so Minnie Minoso, who I remember playing in 1980, by the way, I think he's like 60 years old and he got into a game because he wanted to be like a 5-decade player or something like that. But some of his years that he had, they should have probably been put him in. But Jim Cott, who was, to me, he was a good pitcher, but he pitched for a long time. But I'm thinking it's a combination because he's been a broadcaster, very, very good broadcaster for a long time. He had a big slip up, though, in the playoffs, right? Or this past year, he said something that was really off color. But 82 years old, I think they gave him a little bit of a pass, and he apologized right away. But I don't have a problem with him being in, but he pitched for a long time. I never remember him being like one of the best pitchers in the game back then. He was just very, very consistent. Gil Hodges and Tony Oliva. Well, Buck O'Neill, I'll say that real quick. I always thought he was in because he was like the ambassador for the Negro Leagues for a long time. And I know he had a really good career in the Negro Leagues, but it seemed like he was more, pushing for there to be a Negro League Hall of Fame in Kansas City. And, it just seemed like he was more of an ambassador. I thought he was in. So I was a little bit surprised. I know he's been passed away quite several years, but he lived a long life. He was like well into his 90s, I think, when he passed away. But anyway, I want to talk about Tony Oliva. And, the Twins were one of those teams that was good every year, it seemed like back then, but you would never see them on TV. You only had the game of the week, back then. So a lot of these Twins players, they kind of flew under the radar, like Jim Cott, who was with the Twins for a long time. But Tony Oliva had such a stretch run. He had about 7 great years, but he got hurt also. It's a little like, I'll compare his career a little bit to Don Mattingly, and so which is why you probably didn't get in on the regular side. But check out this: 1964 was his first big year. He had 217 hits. He had 32 homers, 94 RBIs. He wasn't a big, home run guy, but he batted .323, which in 1964 was big, and he led the league in hitting. 1965, they went to the World Series that year, lost to the Dodgers. 185 hits, 16 homers, 98 RBIs, batted .321, led the league in hitting again. 66, 191 hits, 25 homers, 87 RBIs, .307. 1969, 109. They made the playoffs in '69. They were one of the first team to win the Western Division. 197 hits, 24 homers, 101 RBIs, batted .309. 1970, 204 hits, 23 homers, 107 RBIs. He batted .325. 1971 was his last great year. He had 164 hits, but he played in like 130-something games. But he had 22 homers, 81 RBIs, batted .337, led the league in hitting that year. So he led the league in hitting 3 times. He was an all-star 9 times. But after 71, from 72 to 75, he started getting hurt and his game slowed down, and he had decent years. And then in 76, he had a really bad leg injury and he was shot. But I thought that it's an interesting career, and I think it's proper for the Veterans Committee to put him in because I think that, he definitely proved enough. Had he not been injured, and I'd like to see them do that with Don Mattingly at some point, because now he's had a long managerial career, as well. I think you have to take that into consideration. He's been a good manager. Has he won any World Series? No, but he's been a pretty solid manager for a long time now. Gil Hodges, real quick, Gil Hodges was just really, really consistent. He was a slugger, but he was a heart and soul. He was the leader of those Dodger teams in the 40s and 50s. His big year was 1954. He had 42 homers, 130 RBIs, and he batted 304. But typically, he was a 25 to 30 home run guy, pretty much every year. He was an 8-time All-Star. It's not an interesting fact, but it's just heartbreaking. Obviously he's more in because of his managerial career wasn't that great, actually. He managed the Senators almost right after, he finished playing because he was a leader. And the Senators didn't do well. He was finally getting them. They won 73 games in 1967. So he was definitely building them, and they fired him. They were like done, but they fired him because they had the opportunity to bring in Ted Williams as a manager, who wasn't a good manager either. But anyway, the Mets immediately scooped him up. And in 1968, the Mets, was the first year that they didn't finish in last place. You could feel something building with him, because the Mets had that core of young players. And then obviously we know what happened in 69, the Miracle Mets. They won 100 games that year. They obviously beat the heavily favored Orioles. They beat the Braves, who were heavily favored in the playoffs, and then they beat the Orioles. And then the next couple of years, the Mets were good. They were okay. They didn't get into the playoffs. They were like 5-6 games over 500. But then they made a couple of moves in 72, and they thought they were going to be really good. And this is where it takes a tragic turn. The last day of spring training, early April, it's Easter Sunday. They're getting ready to start the season that Monday. And Gil Hodges goes out golfing with all of the Met coaches. And walking into the hotel, he collapses. And he hits his head. He collapses backwards, and he hits his head. He had a heart attack, but they didn't think that the heart attack is what would have killed him. They think that if they would have gotten to the hospital in time, he would probably survive the heart attack. And they got him to the hospital pretty quickly, but the massive trauma to his head when he fell, because he was a big guy, and the combination of that, the heart attack, he died. They said 20 minutes after they got him to the hospital, and so that was just really, really tragic. And what was interesting is that Gil Hodges seemed like he was older than he actually was. He was only 47, and dying at that age was really, really tough. The Mets were devastated. It took them a while to recover. Yogi Berra actually took over as manager that year, and then we know what happened in '73 when Yogi Berra led them to the World Series. But kind of a sad ending to Gil Hodges' life. Now, I'll throw this one other thing in. He smoked about 4 or 5 packs of cigarettes a day. So, and
wow.
It was different. Athletes now, you won't really see that, often. I don't think there's many athletes that'll smoke. I remember Keith Hernandez used to smoke in the dugout, but I think he gave up smoking a long time ago. But Jim Leland was another one. You see him smoking in the dugout, and they banned that several years ago. But he was a habitual smoker, so that led to he had a heart attack a few years ago. Before that, like in '68, I think he had a heart attack. It was a minor one, but that one killed him at the age of 47. At the end of spring training, it was just unbelievable. I remember at 11 years old, I'm like, what, really? The manager of the Mets died. It was like this. It's really like stunning. So anyway. I wouldn't say those are fun facts, but those were my couple of facts from the Hall of Fame, new class of the Hall of Fame, at least Veterans Committee staff.
Yeah, I got an interesting fact because he kind of came up in the news, and then also 2 NFL ones.
Okay.
So I don't know if you saw this. Ichiro kind of made a guest appearance. There was this high school team that just kind of like I can only imagine like high school guys tweeted at Ichiro like, hey, you want to come out to batting practice? And then sure enough, he shows up and he's like raking home runs at 48 years old.
How old is he? 48?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So interesting stuff that I saw about him. So when he came over, he singled in his 10th at bat, which put his batting average at 300, 3 for 10. From that point on in his career, he never batted career below 300.
Oh my gosh.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. I
Wow.
don't know when he comes up for the Hall of Fame. I would assume maybe in the next couple of years.
Oh, he's first
like,
ballot. You got to put him
Yeah.
in the ballot. It's like 2 careers that he had. He was an amazing player. Wow, I didn't realize that. So after his first 10 at bats, for the rest of his career, he never batted less than 300.
Yep.
Wow, that's amazing.
So he's obviously very world-class talent.
Yeah.
Actually, I do have another one. So taking out the last 2 years this year, the last 20 MVPs is very interesting in baseball. Obviously, like the last 10 years in each league. Only 5 of them made the World Series in the same season, with 4 out of the 5 of them winning it all. Mookie Betts in 2018, Jose Altuve in 2017, Chris Bryant in 2016, Buster Posey in 2012. And then Miguel Cabrera made it, but didn't win it in 2012 as well. So it is interesting because, like, usually you think MVP, a guy with a winning team, but that team doesn't always go to the World Series. So
that is interesting. Yeah, because that's what we think of, right? Oh, man, we're not going to have an MVP from a losing team, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, as you know, the Detroit Lions won their first game in actually exactly 364 days. So they beat the Vikings. But listen to what the Vikings have had to deal with all year. So you always have like those few teams that have like always the close finishes.
Yeah.
Listen to this is the recap of their season. Week 1, they lost to a walk-off field goal in overtime. Week 2, they lost on a missed field goal. Week 5, they won on a walk-off field goal. Week 6, they won on a walk-off touchdown in overtime. Week 8, they lost on a touchdown with 51 seconds left. Week 9, they lost on a walk-off field goal in overtime. Week 11, they win on a walk-off field goal. And then, obviously, last week, they lost to a walk-off touchdown. Like, if you're a Vikings fan, make sure you're taking care of yourself so that you're not having a heart attack.
You definitely taking some acid for your stomach or something, man, if you're a Vikings fan. I didn't realize it was all of that. I knew that it seemed like every week the Vikings, it goes out to the last minute. They play the Steelers on Thursday night this week, so that should be really interesting. It's must-see TV if the Vikings are playing, for sure.
Yeah. Last thing is the Giants one. So obviously one of their big signings over in the offseason was Kenny Gallagher. He has yet to score a touchdown all year.
No, I didn't know. He's a playmaker too. He's very good, and he hasn't scored a touchdown all year. Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And then also to kind of add to that, the Giants as a team have as many touchdowns as Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. They both have 18.
These are some sad stats now with your Giants. Jeez. Oh my God.
Yeah. So there you go.
All right, man. I love them. You always have these great ones. All right, Ken, take us home.
All right. This is Kenny Squared N.
Kenny.
With Sports on the Positive Tip. We'll see you guys next week. Hopefully the Giants will be good at some point this year.
Absolutely. All right. Take care, everybody.